"Do whatever you want, cowboy," said the Apache woman who was tied to the rancher's fence. But then the sun hung high over the vast dry lands of the American Southwest. Heat shimmered off the ground, making the distant hills look like waves on a golden sea. The rancher, a man named Caleb, wiped his brow with the back of his sleeve. His boots crunched against the dusty path as he checked the fences and animals scattered across the ranch. Life out here was hard, but it was familiar. Every fence he repaired, every cow he guided back to the corral, every morning he rose before the sun. It was routine. Yet that afternoon the routine shattered in the most unexpected way. As Caleb rounded a corner near the edge of his property, he froze. There, tied to a wooden fence post, was a woman. Her dark hair was braided and fell over one shoulder. Her clothes were simple, worn from travel, but her posture was proud and unyielding. She didn't look around in fear or beg for help. She sat calmly, her eyes scanning the horizon as if she owned the land, or at least had no reason to fear it. Caleb's first instinct was confusion. He was used to visitors being polite or at least afraid of trespassing on his land. But this woman, she seemed different. She looked straight at him, her gaze steady and spoke in a voice both strong and clear. "Do whatever you want, cowboy." The word struck Caleb like a punch. His mind raced. Who was she? Why was she tied up? Was she mocking him? Or was she daring him? He stepped closer, keeping his hands visible. He had no idea what he should do. He had always been the one in control on this land, the one making decisions. But this woman, she wasn't giving him the usual cues. She wasn't afraid. "Are you okay?" he asked cautiously. His voice sounded softer than he intended. She tilted her head slightly and smiled faintly. "I am. Don't worry about me. You're the one who has a choice here." Caleb frowned, unsure what she meant. Normally someone tied to a fence like this would plead or cry, but she seemed calm, almost confident in her own situation. He looked at the ropes holding her, wondering why someone would leave a person tied here in the open. The rancher's mind flashed to all kinds of dangers. Wild animals, bandits, or worse. Yet none of those possibilities explained her unusual behavior. "Who did this to you?" Caleb asked. The woman's eyes flickered to the horizon, then back to him. "That doesn't matter. It's over now. You're here. That's what matters." Her words were strange, but there was something in her tone that made Caleb pause. She wasn't just speaking. She was choosing her words carefully, almost like she had a plan that didn't involve being helpless. He noticed the small scars on her wrists, the dirt on her clothes, and the dust in her hair. It told a story of struggle, of survival. And yet, she didn't ask for mercy. Caleb hesitated, then took a deep breath. He walked closer to the fence. The ropes were thick, but with effort, he could untie them. He reached for them, but the woman stopped him with a quiet gesture. "Don't rush," she said. "I'm not a damsel in need of rescue. I can handle myself." Caleb blinked. He had never met anyone like her. Out here, people were usually straightforward, afraid, or desperate. But she seemed to command respect without demanding it. He looked at her more carefully. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and unafraid. There was a spark there that told him she had faced far more danger than he could imagine. "Then, why are you tied up here?" Caleb asked, genuinely curious. She let out a soft laugh. It wasn't loud, but it carried confidence. "It's a story for later. For now, think of me as a guest on your land. I can wait." Caleb rubbed his chin, trying to make sense of her words. He had lived on this ranch for many years. He had seen people pass through, travelers, wanderers, even those who ran from trouble. But no one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had dared to be so calm and commanding while in a vulnerable position. For a moment, the rancher studied her. He noticed the strength in her hands, the careful way she balanced herself on the fence, and the way she didn't flinch when a hawk passed overhead. This was someone who had survived far beyond what anyone might expect. He felt a strange mixture of caution and admiration. "I should untie you," he said finally. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. I'm fine. Besides, you wouldn't understand the story if I rushed it. Caleb stepped back. Her words both frustrated and intrigued him. Out here he was used to solving problems quickly, taking control. But this, he had to pause and think. A rare feeling for him. He realized she was teaching him patience, or perhaps testing him. The silence stretched. Only the wind whispered across the dry grass, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Caleb looked around, making sure no one else was near. The woman, still tied to the fence, seemed almost part of the landscape, her calmness contrasting with the harsh sun and open land. After a long pause, Caleb asked, "Are you really alone out here?"
Yes, she replied simply, but alone doesn't mean helpless.
Remember that. Her words echoed in his mind. He had always seen strength as something measured by power, by control over others or over the land. But here was someone who claimed her strength through presence, through choice, and not through force. Caleb felt a strange respect growing for her. He decided to sit on a nearby rock. The sun beat down on him, making his shirt stick to his back. "You've been through something," he said.
I can see it, but I don't understand why you're tied to a fence instead of somewhere safe.
She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Safe doesn't exist until you decide it does. I wasn't looking for safety. I was looking for perspective. And maybe I found it here." Caleb frowned. He didn't know if she was mocking him or giving him wisdom. It was frustrating, but he found himself listening carefully, absorbing every word. Minutes passed. He watched her as she adjusted her position slightly, still tied, still calm. Her hair glinted in the sunlight. The ropes looked uncomfortable, but she barely flinched. Caleb noticed that despite her seeming calm, her body was tense, ready for anything. Finally, he asked, "What will happen if someone comes looking for you?" She turned her head slowly to meet his eyes. "Then we deal with them. Together, if necessary. But until then, I'm fine. And you're learning something, whether you know it or not." Caleb felt a chill run down his spine. It was true. He didn't know this woman, yet he was already learning from her. About patience, about courage, about facing danger without panic, about seeing the world differently. The day wore on, and Caleb found himself talking to her. Not like he would with a visitor or a stranger, but like he was trying to understand someone who carried secrets, wisdom, and experience far beyond what the sun and dust suggested. She shared stories of the land, of people she had met, of challenges she had faced, and she laughed at moments, soft but genuine, making Caleb feel both curious and uneasy. He didn't know what to expect next. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to dip behind the distant hills. Shadows stretched across the ranch. Caleb realized he hadn't moved closer to untying her. Somehow he felt it wasn't the right time. She had said, "Do whatever you want, cowboy," and yet he felt that the real choice wasn't his to make. Not yet. As the wind stirred and the first stars appeared, Caleb looked at her one last time before heading back toward the ranch house to prepare dinner. The woman remained tied to the fence, calm, unafraid, an enigma in the middle of his land. But he knew one thing. Everything had changed. That day, his world shifted in subtle ways. The routines of the ranch, the quiet authority he had always felt, and the predictable life he had led, they all seemed smaller, simpler. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the story of this woman, the Apache woman, tied to the fence, was just beginning. He didn't yet understand the full meaning of her words, but he felt it in his chest. This encounter would stay with him forever. The sun set fully now, painting the sky with gold and crimson. Caleb sat quietly for a moment, feeling both respect and curiosity for the woman who had challenged him without demanding anything. He had come to the land to live a life of certainty, but today he had met uncertainty with courage, and it was strangely exhilarating. He left her there, tied to the fence, yet somehow free in spirit, and as he walked back toward the ranch house, he whispered to himself, almost like a warning or a promise, "Tomorrow, I'll learn more, and I won't underestimate her." The desert night settled in, calm but full of possibilities, and the rancher and the woman, though still apart, shared a silent understanding that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. The ranch was quiet, except for the occasional lowing of cows and the creaking of wooden fence posts in the gentle wind. Caleb woke early, as he always did, but today he felt a restless curiosity stirring inside him. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman tied to the fence, her calm eyes, her confident voice, and the strange sense of freedom she carried despite being bound. All of it weighed on his mind. After a quick breakfast, Caleb grabbed a bucket of water and some cloth to wipe down the fence. As he approached the spot where she had spent the night, he noticed the woman sitting quietly, her posture straight, eyes scanning the land. She looked almost regal in the morning light, and for a moment, Caleb forgot the ropes that still held her. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual, though his voice carried a hint of nervousness. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Morning," she replied. "You came early." "I suppose you wanted to see if I was still here. I wanted to check on you," he said. "And maybe understand why you're here?" She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Understanding takes time, but since you asked, I can share a little." "And so," she began. "My name is Island," she said softly. "I come from the Apache people. I was traveling with my family when trouble found us. Some men wanted something we could not give them. They tried to take what wasn't theirs and hurt those who stood in their way." Her voice was steady, but Caleb could sense the pain behind her words. "They captured me," she continued. "I escaped, though it was not easy. I ran through the desert knowing the land better than they did, and I ended up here, near your ranch. I knew I could survive, but I also knew that whoever tied me here would not follow me too far. It was a place to wait, to catch my breath, to figure out my next move." Caleb listened intently. He had seen danger before, of course, but it was usually simple problems, rustlers, stray animals, or harsh weather. But what Aylin described was deliberate, human cruelty, and yet she told it with calm courage, without a hint of fear. It was remarkable. "You survived alone?" Caleb asked, his voice low. "Yes," she said simply, "because I had to. Survival is not about fear. It's about knowing what to do when fear comes. I could run, hide, or fight. I chose wisely." Caleb felt a mixture of admiration and unease. He had always considered himself brave, used to facing the wilds of the desert, storms, and occasional trespassers. But here was someone who had faced true danger and human malice, and emerged unbroken. He looked around the fence, the ropes still securing her. "You could leave, you know," he said. "I could untie you, and you could walk away. You wouldn't have to wait here." Island's gaze met his. "I'm not waiting to be rescued. I'm waiting to see who you are. Not as a man with a ranch, but as a human being who might understand choices, danger, and courage." Caleb blinked. He had never been challenged like this. Usually, people either begged for help or followed instructions without question. But she spoke as an equal, as someone who carried her own destiny, even while tied to a fence. "Choices, huh?" he said, scratching his head. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "You will," she said quietly. "Life is about making choices, even when everything seems impossible. I made mine by escaping. Now I am choosing to stay here and trust you. Or at least, trust that you will act wisely." Her words struck Caleb. He had never thought of trust like that. Trust was usually earned by obedience or submission, not by shared understanding or courage. Yet here was Island, showing him a different kind of strength, a quiet, steady, confident strength that did not need force to exist. Caleb moved closer to the fence. "Tell me more about your family," he asked.
Aylin's eyes softened. "They are brave people."
"They taught me to respect the land, to know the animals, to move without fear, and to care for others even in hard times. I learned that courage is not loud. It is patient, careful, and sometimes unseen until it matters most." The rancher felt a warmth in his chest. She wasn't just speaking of survival or danger. She was speaking of principles, wisdom, and life itself. For years he had thought of himself as a strong man, someone who could face anything the land threw at him. But now he realized that strength alone was not enough. Understanding, patience, and courage in the face of real danger, those were qualities he was only beginning to grasp. "What happened to your captors?" Caleb asked, his curiosity growing. Island looked away toward the distant hills. "I don't know. I left them behind. That's the past. I survived, and I am here now. The past can be heavy, but it does not control the present. Only choices do." Caleb nodded slowly. He thought of the many times he had clung to the past, mistakes he had made, people he had lost, opportunities he had missed. And he realized that Aelin was teaching him something important, letting go of fear and focusing on the choices he could make now. Hours passed as they talked. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a shimmering landscape of heat and light. Caleb brought her water and some food, which she accepted politely but without gratitude that felt forced. She didn't need pity or charity. She needed respect, and he was beginning to understand how to give it. As the day wore on, they shared stories of the land. Aelin spoke of rivers, mountains, and secret paths only known to those who moved with care. She described animals and plants, showing Caleb how the land provided both danger and safety if you knew it well. He listened with rapt attention, realizing that her knowledge was practical, life-saving, and far beyond what he had expected from someone he first thought was a stranger in need. "You know this land better than I do," he admitted quietly. She smiled. "I know the desert, yes. But you know the ranch. We each have our strengths. And sometimes, strength alone is not enough. Wisdom matters too."
Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hooves.
Caleb stiffened. He had seen many travelers and wanderers, but the sound felt different this time, urgent, purposeful. Island noticed his tension and gave him a small, calm smile. "Relax," she said. "We will see soon enough who approaches, and if danger comes, we will face it together." Caleb felt his heart race, but he also felt a strange sense of calm. He realized that for the first time he was not acting alone. The woman tied to the fence was not helpless. She was a partner, a guide, and perhaps even a teacher. The sound grew closer, and soon a figure appeared on the horizon. Caleb squinted. It was a lone rider moving swiftly toward the ranch. He reached for his rifle, but Aelin gently touched his arm. "Not yet," she said. "Let's see what this person wants. Sometimes the best choice is patience." Caleb exhaled slowly, learning again the value of waiting, of observing, and of trusting someone else's judgment. The rider approached, and as he drew near, Caleb could see that he was not a threat, just a traveler, perhaps curious about the ranch or lost in the vast desert. But the lesson was clear. Danger could come in many forms, and how you respond defines who you are. By afternoon, the heat had softened, and a breeze stirred the air. Caleb and Island continued talking. She revealed stories of her people, their customs, their courage, and their struggles. She spoke of loyalty, respect, and freedom, not as abstract ideas but as lived experiences shaped by the land, the people, and the choices they made every day. Caleb realized he had never heard anyone speak like this. Even the most seasoned ranchers, the oldest cowboys, had never taught him lessons so quietly, so profoundly. He had thought the desert only tested your body, but Aelin was teaching him that it tested your mind, your heart, and your understanding of life itself. As the sun began to sink behind the hills, casting long shadows across the ranch, Caleb felt a bond forming, not one of possession or control, but mutual respect. He had met many people in his life, but few had left such a mark. Aelin was different. She had survived danger, claimed her own freedom, and yet chosen to share a piece of her wisdom with him. When night fell, Caleb built a small fire while Aelin remained tied but comfortable. The stars appeared above, brilliant and countless, stretching across the sky. They sat together quietly, the firelight flickering across their faces, each lost in thought. Caleb reflected on the morning, the conversations, and the lessons he had already learned. He realized that the story was only beginning. Island's past, her courage, and her choices were threads that would shape the days to come. He understood that he had much to learn, not just about survival, but about respect, wisdom, and the true meaning of courage. For now, they sat in silence, two people from different worlds connected by circumstance, trust, and the quiet understanding that sometimes freedom was not about escape, but about choice. And as the desert night deepened, Caleb knew that tomorrow would bring more lessons, more challenges, and perhaps a deeper understanding of the woman who had boldly declared, "Do whatever you want, cowboy." The morning dawned clear and bright, with sunlight spilling over the desert like warm gold. Caleb awoke early, as usual, but there was a different feeling in the air today, something heavier, almost like the land itself was holding its breath. He glanced toward the fence where Island had spent the night. She was awake, sitting calmly, her eyes tracing the horizon as if reading the desert like a book. "You slept well?" he asked, approaching carefully. "Better than I expected," Aylin replied, her voice calm, but her gaze remained distant. "The night is quiet, but something tells me today will not be ordinary." Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pointed toward a distant rise. "Look, there." The tracks. Someone passed this way last night, and they are moving fast. Caleb followed her gaze and saw the faint impression of hooves in the soft desert sand, leading toward the ranch. His pulse quickened. "Travelers?" he asked cautiously. Island shook her head. "Danger. Perhaps men from the group that tried to capture me, or others looking for trouble. Either way, we must be ready." Caleb felt a tangle of fear and excitement. He had faced storms, wild animals, and rustlers before, but this was different. These were people who intended harm, and Aylin had warned him. She was not helpless, and neither was he if he acted wisely. "We need to protect a ranch," he said, his voice steadying. "And we need to protect you." Aylin smiled faintly.
Protect me? Perhaps.
"But remember, I am not defenseless. Together, we can handle what comes." He nodded. The desert, vast and open, offered little cover, but Caleb knew the land well. He began to move quietly, taking Island with him to a small rise near the edge of the property, where they could observe the approaching figures without being seen. As they crouched behind the rocks, Caleb counted 3 riders in the distance. They were moving fast, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. He could see that they were armed, carrying ropes and simple weapons, their intent clear. "Do you know who they are?" Caleb whispered. Island studied them carefully. "Not exactly, but I recognize their pattern. They are searching, moving with purpose, expecting resistance or surprise. That means we have a chance to prepare." Caleb's heart raced. He had never faced an enemy like this, not close, not with stakes so high. Yet he felt a strange calm with Aylin at his side. She was not panicked. She was analyzing, planning, guiding him without giving orders. "Then what do we do?" he asked.
Island's eyes gleamed with focus. "We wait."
Observe. Choose our moment. In situations like this, haste leads to mistakes. Patience leads to survival. Caleb nodded again. He watched as the riders drew closer, kicking up dust and shouting to one another. The desert wind carried their voices faintly, giving him time to plan. He realized that Aylin's calmness was teaching him an invaluable lesson. Strength and wisdom together outmatch raw force. When the riders were close enough to see the fence where Aylin had been tied, one of them pointed. "There!" the rider shouted. "She was here last night. We'll catch her." Aylin's eyes narrowed. "They have no idea who they are dealing with," she said quietly, "or what they might find." Caleb felt a surge of determination. He had never been one to back down, and now, with Aylin by his side, he understood that courage meant more than fighting. It meant thinking, observing, and acting at the right moment. The riders dismounted, moving closer to the fence, scanning the land. Caleb crept down from the rocks, signaling Aelin to follow. She untied herself quickly, her hands skilled and precise, and then crouched beside him. Together, they moved quietly, blending with the desert shadows. The riders were focused on the fence, not noticing the two figures moving toward them from the cover of rocks and sagebrush. Caleb felt his hands tighten around a sturdy stick he had picked up, a weapon more for defense than attack, but Aelin moved lightly, her movements fluid, almost like she was part of the land itself. As they closed the distance, Aelin whispered instructions. "When I signal, you block their path. Do not act alone. We act together, understand?" Caleb nodded. His heart pounded, but he followed her lead. Suddenly, one of the riders reached for a rope. "She's not far!" he shouted. Aelin moved first. With quick, precise movements, she grabbed a rope the rider had dropped, swung it, and caught the legs of one of the horses, causing it to stumble. The rider barely held on, startled, while Caleb used the moment to step forward and push another rider off balance. The chaos startled the men. Caleb realized they were not prepared for opposition, especially not from someone they thought was helpless. Aelin's calm focus guided him through the moment, and together they created confusion among the riders. One rider tried to draw a weapon, but Aelin moved quickly, knocking it aside. Caleb felt adrenaline surge through him, but he also remembered her words: patience, observation, and wise action. He didn't rush. He acted carefully, only when the moment was right. The riders, realizing they were outmaneuvered, began to retreat, shouting threats. Caleb and Aelin did not pursue. They watched as the men disappeared over the horizon, leaving dust in their wake. Breathing heavily, Caleb turned to Aelin. You were incredible," he said, awe in his voice. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "Incredible?" "No, prepared, focused, and aware. That is what matters. Fear is easy. Control and calm are harder. Remember that." Caleb nodded, understanding the truth in her words. He had faced danger before, but never with such precision, such wisdom, such a clear mind. And he realized that Aelin's courage was not just in action but in how she thought. For the rest of the day they worked together to secure the ranch. Caleb repaired broken fence posts, while Aelin moved quietly, observing the land for signs of further danger. She taught him to notice subtle changes in the desert, the direction of the wind, the tracks in the sand, the distant calls of birds. Each lesson was practical, vital, and showed Caleb that survival was about awareness as much as strength. By late afternoon, the ranch was quiet again. The riders had not returned, and the desert stretched endlessly around them. Caleb felt exhausted, but also alive in a way he had never experienced. Danger had come, and he had survived, not alone, but with Aelin by his side. Sitting on a rock, Caleb finally allowed himself to speak freely. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," he said. "Not just brave, but wise. You teach without forcing, guide without ordering, and fight without fear. It's remarkable." Aelin smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the setting sun. "We all have lessons to learn. Today, you learned patience, observation, and courage. Tomorrow will bring more."
Caleb realized she was right.
This encounter was not just about survival. It was about growth, understanding, and trust. He had always thought of himself as a capable rancher, a man of the land. But Aelin had shown him that true strength came from knowledge, partnership, and the courage to act wisely in moments of danger. As night fell, they prepared a small camp near the edge of the ranch. Caleb gathered firewood while Aelin untied herself completely and moved with confidence, her presence calm yet commanding. The fire flickered, casting shadows that danced across the desert floor. They sat together, sharing a simple meal. Caleb listened as Aelin told stories of her people, of how they moved with the land, of lessons learned from hardship and survival. Each story carried meaning, not just about life in the desert, but about resilience, freedom, and choice. "I have faced danger many times," she said, "but courage is not only about facing enemies. It's about making choices when the outcome is uncertain. You can fight, run, hide, or negotiate. Every choice shapes who you are. Caleb thought of the riders, of the moment of chaos, and of how their calm, coordinated actions had turned the situation in their favor. He realized that every lesson Aelin had shared was proven in action. The stars filled the sky above them, brilliant and countless. The desert night was silent except for the crackle of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Caleb felt a deep respect for the woman who had challenged him, guided him, and survived danger with skill and wisdom beyond his own. By the time they settled to rest, Caleb understood that the events of the day had changed him. The ranch, the land, and his life would never feel the same. Danger had come, but so had understanding. And together he and Aelin had proven that courage, wisdom, and trust could overcome even the most unexpected threats. Tomorrow, Caleb knew, would bring more challenges. But for now, he felt ready. The riders were gone, the ranch was secure, and he had learned the true meaning of partnership and bravery. Aelin had survived, and he had learned lessons he would carry forever. The desert slept under the vast sky, and for the first time Caleb felt that he and Aelin were not just surviving. They were preparing for whatever came next. The next morning the desert glowed softly under the early sun. Caleb woke with the first light, feeling a mix of alertness and calm. After yesterday's danger, the ranch seemed almost peaceful, yet he knew the land could change at any moment. He looked toward the fence, half expecting to see Aelin still tied, but she was already awake, standing tall and stretching lightly. Her presence was commanding yet serene, like the desert itself.
Good morning, Caleb said.
Morning, she replied. Her voice was steady, calm, confident. I slept well. Did you? Caleb nodded.
I did, though my mind is still running from yesterday. Aelin smiled faintly. It will.
But you are learning something important. Danger passes, but the lessons stay. Remember that. He looked at her carefully. She had been tied to the fence, captured, and yet she had survived and thrived. More than that, she had taught him lessons he would never forget. Courage, patience, wisdom, and trust. They were all wrapped in her calm presence. I never thanked you, Caleb said, for guiding me, for everything. You don't need to thank me, Aelin replied. I did what I had to do, and you did what you had to do. That is enough. They worked quietly together for the morning, repairing fence posts, tending the livestock, and preparing the ranch for whatever might come. Caleb noticed small changes in himself. He was more observant, more thoughtful, and less impulsive. He thought about yesterday's conflict and how they had faced it not with reckless force, but with careful action, trust, and coordination. Around midday, a breeze swept across the desert, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke and dust. Caleb stiffened. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. Aelin studied the horizon, her eyes sharp. Perhaps. But they have learned something yesterday. This land is not easy, and we are not easy targets. Their fear will slow them, and the desert will guide them elsewhere. Caleb nodded. He realized that her understanding of the land, of people, and of danger was far deeper than his own. He had always thought knowledge came from years of experience, but Aelin had gained it through struggle, observation, and survival. He felt both admiration and humility. After a while, they stopped their work and sat beneath a small shaded tree. Caleb looked at Aelin and asked, Do you ever get tired? After all you faced? She shook her head. Tired? Yes, of the body sometimes, but the mind grows stronger. Each challenge, each danger, each choice, it teaches something. You carry it with you, and it shapes who you are. Caleb thought of the past few days, the moment he first saw her tied to the fence, the stories she had shared, and the way they had faced the riders together. Everything felt sharper, clearer, and more important now. He realized that survival was not just about strength. It was about wisdom, courage, and learning from every moment. They were interrupted by the distant sound of hooves. Caleb tensed, but Aelin held up a hand. Wait, she said. Observe. A single rider approached slowly, waving a white flag. Caleb and Aelin watched as the figure drew closer. It was one of the riders from before, a messenger of sorts, coming alone this time. When the rider reached them, he dismounted carefully. "I mean no harm," he said, bowing slightly. "My companions, they underestimated you. I was sent to apologize and deliver a message. You are not to be pursued again." Caleb and Island exchanged a glance. The desert had tested them, but their calm courage and coordinated action had turned the tide. The rider left, a clear warning to his companions. The ranch and its defenders were not to be challenged lightly. After he departed, Caleb exhaled slowly, feeling relief wash over him. "It's over," he said. "For now at least." Aelin nodded. "For now. But remember, danger is always part of life. It comes and goes. What matters is how you face it and what you learn from it." The afternoon passed quietly. Caleb and Island tended to the ranch, spoke of stories, and shared laughter for the first time in days. Caleb noticed how much he had changed already, his mind sharper, his patience deeper, his understanding of courage and strength broader. As the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the desert, Island turned to him. "You've learned well," she said softly. "Not because I taught you, but because you were willing to see, to listen, and to act wisely. That is the greatest lesson of all." Caleb smiled faintly. "And you've survived everything and still teach, still guide. You're remarkable." She shook her head. "I only did what I had to do. Survival is not about being remarkable. It's about being aware, patient, and brave. And now you understand that too." The fire they built that evening cast a warm glow across the desert. Stars appeared in the sky, countless and brilliant, reflecting in Caleb's eyes as he thought of the lessons learned. Life was unpredictable, sometimes dangerous, sometimes beautiful. But he realized that strength was nothing without wisdom, and courage was nothing without careful thought. Aelin remained tied to the fence for the last time that evening. Caleb carefully loosened the ropes, and she stepped free. Her eyes met his, calm and unwavering, as if to say, "I trusted you, and you understood." "You're free," Caleb said quietly but firmly. "I've always been free," she replied. "Freedom is not about being tied or untied. Freedom is in choice. I chose my path, and I will continue to do so." Caleb nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He realized that the first words she had spoken to him, "Do whatever you want, cowboy," were never a challenge to him. They were a declaration of her own strength and agency. As night deepened, the desert was silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the distant call of owls. Caleb and Island sat side by side, reflecting on the events of the past days. The danger had come, and they had faced it together, learning lessons that would stay with them forever. Island spoke softly, almost to herself. "Every challenge teaches. Every choice matters. And sometimes, the greatest courage is in the quiet moments, the decisions made with wisdom, patience, and respect." Caleb looked at her and felt gratitude, respect, and admiration. He had learned more in a few days than in many years on the ranch. He had learned about life, courage, and trust from someone who had endured far more than he could imagine. "You'll leave soon, won't you?" he asked gently. "Yes," Island replied, "but the lessons remain. You've seen what courage looks like, not just in action but in thought. You've learned that freedom is in choice, and that trust is earned through respect and understanding. Carry that with you, and you will be stronger than you know." Caleb nodded. "I will." "Thank you, Island, for everything." They spent the last moments of night quietly together, watching the desert stars, the vast expanse of land stretching endlessly around them. And as the first light of dawn approached, Island mounted her horse. She looked at Caleb one last time, her expression serene, confident, and full of quiet strength. "Farewell, Caleb," she said. "May your choices be wise, your courage steady, and your heart open." "And yours," he replied. "Safe travels, Alan. You've taught me more than I can ever say." With that, she rode into the desert, her figure gradually disappearing into the morning light. Caleb watched until she was gone, feeling a strange mixture of loss and gratitude. She had been tied to his fence, challenged his understanding, survived danger, and then left him with lessons he would carry forever. He returned to the ranch house, the sun rising higher, casting warmth over the land. The ranch seemed brighter, the air fresher, and the world more alive. Caleb knew that life would continue, with its routines, challenges, and surprises. But he also knew that he had been changed by the woman who had said, "Do whatever you want, cowboy." From that day forward, Caleb worked the ranch with new perspective. He noticed things he had ignored before. The subtle tracks in the sand, the way the wind carried scents, the quiet wisdom and observation. He treated the land, the animals, and the people he met with greater care, patience, and understanding. And sometimes when the wind blew just right across the desert hills, he could almost see her, riding freely, confident, and untamed, a reminder that true strength is quiet, choices are powerful, and courage can take many forms. The desert continued, vast and endless, but Caleb was ready. He had learned what mattered most. Survival is not just about strength, but wisdom. Courage is not just about action, but choice. And freedom is not just physical, but found in the heart and mind. The lessons of Eileen, the Apache woman tied to the rancher's fence, would remain with him forever. And in those lessons, Caleb found a new understanding of life, respect, and the power of human courage.